Hello, welcome to the Amplify Health Threat Hunting Program Project Kickoff. In this meeting, we will walk through the basics of this project, the why, the what, the who, the when, etc. We will also touch on the resources, the processes, the risks, and communication plan for this project to be successful. This presentation won't take long, so please hold all questions until the end, and we will have time for a Q&A session. I would like to note I am a little sick, so apologies in advance for coughing or if I need to take a drink of water. Let's get started by level setting on how this project defines threat hunting. What is threat hunting? Threat hunting is the human-driven, proactive, and iterative search through networks, endpoints, or data sets in order to detect malicious, suspicious, or risky activity that have evaded detection by existing automated tools. Note that this effort is human-driven and iterative. We develop a hypothesis for identifying an adversary in our network. We search for those indicators, and we repeat the process based on what we've learned from previous searches. Also of note is risky activities. This may not be attributed to a threat actor, but we should be documenting activity that we think is risky for further review. Remediating this would fall outside of the scope of the project, but we don't want to ignore valuable findings that might improve our security posture. This is the last lengthy verbiage that would be read directly. It's copied directly from the project plan, but it is crucial for understanding why this project is being done in the first place. The primary objective of the project is to improve and expand Amplify Health's incident response capabilities. These changes are intended to detect breaches of Amplify Health's network more quickly, thus limiting the impact of potential breaches that may have evaded detection by our cybersecurity tools. When this project is complete, Amplify Health will have a basic threat intelligence framework and the foundations for basic threat hunting procedures with reporting measures to measure its efficacy. From this project, Amplify Health will be able to mature the threat hunting capabilities of its SOC team to better support its incident response program. And further below, we have just some bulleted out benefits that this project will provide, mostly overall improvement to our security posture. For this project, I'll be performing the hunts, but I will be coordinating this with the project team for guidance, tips, and feedback. Kevin and Smitty, team members are listed below. Kevin and Smitty will be providing threat intel feeds for IOC management. These IOCs are not to be confused with the TTPs, or the tactics, techniques, and procedures that will be the basis for our hunts. Upon project completion, the plan is to involve the security engineers in the hunting process. We can team up to perform hunts while we build the skill set, or we can do it individually and review our findings with the team. The architects will provide additional guidance and support as needed. And then, of course, Lauren, being the project sponsor, will be our advocate for moving this program forward and maturing it. The requirements in scope for this project. So there are two primary workflows for this project: intelligence, which informs the hunts, and the hunts themselves. In other words, the threat hunting is dependent on the threat intelligence. Additionally, we will build out reporting, communicating its effectiveness, and documentation, documenting for standardization. The scope of this project will be managed as a traditional waterfall project, i.e. step 1, followed by 2, followed by 3, etc. You'll notice that the threat intelligence feeds directly into the threat hunting, and the reporting is dependent on both of those pieces being completed or being started, at least, mostly finished before the reporting can start. And then the same with the documentation. So we should be wrapping up, finalizing what that documentation is as we collect and identify our procedures along the way. Not required or out of scope. So just as important as defining what we are doing, we need to know what we won't be doing as part of this project to keep it on track, avoiding scope creep. We're going to be we will not be improving current incident response processes. So we already have this established, and while it can always be matured and improved, that's not the focus of this project. So if we do need to document anything that should be changed or updated for our incident response process, we'll simply do that and review it with the incident response team for review at a later time or as part of a separate initiative. Now, automation. We will not be building out reports or scheduled searches that look for the stuff that we have developed for our potential queries as part of the hunts. Now we can come back to that as we feel develop our skill set and feel confident in the searches that we've built. But given the time and troubleshooting involved with automating workflows, we're going to avoid that until after the project is completed. Resolving issues. This particularly involves work that would just be outside of our scope, but that might be a legitimate issue. In the past, when looking at data in our environment, for example, I've come across incidents where a service account may have failed to authenticate dozens or hundreds of times. Remediating that, troubleshooting that's not part of this project. So we can document those. We can submit internal resource requests to the applicable teams to resolve those, but we will not be doing that as part of this project. And then lastly, remediating data collection gaps. So as we identify areas that we would like to improve in our threat hunting process, if we don't currently have data feeds set up for those to either go into the SIM or into another database for collection, we're not going to be doing that as part of this project. Again, we can document that, we can review it upon project completion or as part of a separate initiative. This slide is a breakdown of the work that was identified on the requirements slide. So you'll notice that we have threat intel followed by 4 categories: identifying threat intel sources, ingesting that intel, evaluating and searching for IOCs, indicators of compromise, and investigating or denying, blocking those IOCs. This is a separate process from the overall hunt. So the IOCs are largely a copy and paste process that we'll touch on later. The threat hunt will be identifying a threat model, identifying TTPs for adversaries, and then using those TTPs for hunts 1, followed by hunt 2 and 3. My expectation is that hunts 2 and 3 will look at different TTPs altogether just to start to build out that skill set. But if we find that there's a lot of valuable work that's a higher priority that we do in hunt 1, we can replicate it under like hunt 3, for example. So we don't need to hold ourselves to a rigid schedule, or not schedule, but requirements for the hunt themselves. We can modify those as best fits the organization. And then reporting, we have identifying IOC metrics, creating an IOC report, identifying hunt metrics, and creating a hunt report. So again, these are both built off of just reporting, which is essentially just communication for leadership on what we've done for each of those workflows, threat intel and threat hunts. And then documenting one SOP for each of the workflows here. Those can be expanded upon and built out following the project, but we'll be documenting at least the basis, the foundation for the threat hunting process as we go forward. That documentation will be used for making sure that we're all kind of following that standard process that's been developed, but also for training new personnel that come onto the team. All right, next we have resources. So for this project, we have a number of resources, network assets being the biggest one. This will be every workstation, server, and domain controller. And the reason that those are specifically called out is that those are the assets that we have CrowdStrike sensors installed on. Those sensors are the foundation for much of the hunting capabilities that we currently have. Network assets that are not included in this project are printers, fax machines, telephony systems. Those products could be reviewed at a later time. They could be considered gaps that we document if we want to incorporate them. But at this time, we are not able to install the CrowdStrike sensor on those, so we'll consider those out of scope for this project. Another valuable resource next is the threat intelligence sources. So we have 4 of them that have been identified. The Health ISAC, which is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center for the healthcare industry. The Risk IQ, which is essentially just another version of a Health ISAC. It provides some IOCs for investigating in an environment. And then CrowdStrike has its own intelligence sources for threat actors, which we'll be leveraging, and then also the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which CrowdStrike models their threat intel off of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So both of those tools will be used to help identify TTPs and detecting them in our environment. CrowdStrike, just in general, the sensors I had already mentioned being installed on the network assets, but it also has the investigate module that is going to be the foundation for doing our threat hunts and searches for IOCs. Exabeam, this is going to be our secondary hunting tool. We do have Exabeam is our SIM. There's some scenarios where it's much easier to look at a timeline of events in Exabeam, so we'll be using that tool to pivot as needed. And as we develop our skill set, Exabeam might become the primary tool to do investigations because all the other tools feed into Exabeam. But it is a little bit cumbersome to develop the queries for hunting, and the goal of this is just to establish the basic foundation. So we're starting with the simple stuff that is just a little user-friendly in the CrowdStrike application. And then lastly, Cisco Umbrella. So this is a very specific use case resource that is going to block domains for our network. So as we identify indicators of compromise that use domain names, we add them to the block list directly in Cisco Umbrella. All right, so here we have a little bit different slide just for a little bit of fun. Break things up so we're not reading so much. I just want to stress that the first part of this project will focus on intelligence resources in the IOCs. Effective hunting should be the focus and have an idea of what anomalies or signatures we're looking for. It would be ineffective and time consuming, for example, to look at every element in this picture to identify what shouldn't be there. So we use intelligence sources to help us focus our search area and identify signatures. In this case, the centaur is out of place. We can then look for indicators of where horse and human features have been combined. We have plenty of people in here. We have a couple of horses, but there's only one instance of a centaur being present in the environment. Essentially just streamlining, focusing our area so that we can get the most out of the time that we spend investigating our data sets. The processes. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the IOCs, indicators of compromise, and these searches are really simple. They're low-hanging fruit that don't require much effort. So we are keeping them. I'm keeping them as separate from the larger hunting effort. This is largely a copy and paste effort, but it shouldn't be overlooked. For this process, we will be ingesting data from our threat intel sources, primarily the health ISAC. These IOCs will come in the form of hashes, IPs, and domains. We will search our environment for their signatures and investigate any hits. We've been doing this for the past couple of weeks already. At this point, we haven't identified any IOCs in our environment, but if we do, we will investigate the use cases for those. We've decided to separate these, as I mentioned, is because the hunting will require more manual work to develop and perform. Our hunts will eventually be a bit more involved, but at first they will be small in scope and complexity. Our hypothesis will be directly taken from CrowdStrike and MITRE ATT&CK frameworks based on the TTPs of adversaries identified there. For example, one of the first hunts that we performed on an adversary is the command and control using remote access software. So the examples given are the use of AnyDesk or PuTTY, and so we specifically search for uses of those applications in our environment, and those are good. Those turned out to be good examples because we have one application which has very few hits, and so it's just as important to figure out like why a few people are using those, and if we can actually get rid of that, or if it's on our banned list of software applications. Whereas PuTTY is a much more commonly used application, so it requires a different style of investigation to go through and identify what's possibly suspicious or malicious, if anything is in there. For these first few hunts, it's important to lay the foundation for the process, and as we become more familiar with the data we evaluate, we'll be able to develop more elaborate hypotheses for identifying adversaries in our environment. All right. As I mentioned earlier, we've kind of already started some of this stuff. So normally this project kickoff would take place before we've started any of this work, but uh, you know, in this case, we've already kind of covered a lot of ground in the project. Most of the threat intel stuff has been wrapped up. At this point, there's some documentation and reporting is still in progress that needs to take place. But for the most part, this is just the general breakdown that I showed you before in a timeline version. So we have our project kicked off at the beginning of the semester, as this was kind of mapped out, planned out prior to the semester starting. So I was able to get a good start on a lot of this work. And as you can see, that again, it's just a very standard waterfall project that we have here. Key dates, just to note, wrapping up each one of these work streams is considered, a key requirement or milestone for this project. Wrapping up the threat intel, wrapping up the first, second, and third hunts, and then wrapping up the reporting and the documentation that we've kind of already highlighted. All right, the risks and mitigations for this project. So the risks below, excessive false positive investigations lead to missed deadlines. In this example, we just spend too much time going down rabbit holes trying to figure out what's going on. So that's one thing we want to keep a lid on, so that we're not spending too much time. My apologies. Too much time and not getting, not finding anything, or kind of bleeding over and missing deadlines in the timeline. The second risk, investigating scope creep, leads to delays. So this is, in similar, we spend too much time looking at things that are not required for this project, and we're not focusing on the core requirements of the project. So the last risk is communication failures. As being a former project manager, one of the biggest things that leads to a successful project is effective communication with all stakeholders. So, we want to avoid failures or ineffective communication that lead to work not being completed or not being done as expected. And then we have the mitigations for each of those. So the first mitigation for excessive investigation is going to be performing smaller searches initially and expand upon that as we develop our confidence and skill set to be able to do so. I've also baked in a couple of weeks buffer into the timeline, so I think I targeted mid-April to wrap up everything, but that can bleed over into the next week or two and have that finish up by the deadlines of the semester. The second one is identifying in-scope requirements, and if we do identify something that we feel needs to be part of the project that was overlooked, that does happen from time to time, a change request will need to be submitted and approved by the project sponsor, Lauren. And then lastly, identifying project stakeholders and communication plan to keep the team updated. That's largely how we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that we're not over communicating but not under communicating, finding the needs for each of the stakeholders so that they're getting the information they need to do their job effectively. And that brings us to just the communication plan in general. So for one, documentation will be stored in our Team OneNote. Here's a fake hyperlink to our threat hunting documentation that reflects what the real one would look like. And all of our team members have access to that and can add content as needed. Status updates. So we'll be performing status updates every Monday and Thursday. Those meeting invites have been sent out. And then bi-weekly, there'll be just a overall status update for Lauren and anybody else who would like to attend, and that'll take place every other week on Wednesday. There are also some stakeholders that are not part of the project team. We understand that it's not just the project team that is impacted by this or finds it valuable. So we do have a non-project project audience. We have general updates can be provided to our full InfoSec team during our weekly team meetings, and the CISO and CIO will be kept informed as needed by the project sponsor. So that'll rely on Lauren for providing that. All right, that wraps up the content of the project kickoff presentation. I'll pause for a moment to take any questions. Since there are no other questions, I want to thank you all for your time and support for this project. I will send everyone the slide deck so you can have a copy. Thanks again, and have a great day.